Last season around this time, we were preparing for the Golden State Warriors and the Boston Celtics to match up in the NBA Finals. The Boston Celtics were coming off a very close and clutch Eastern Conference Finals win over the Miami Heat, in which Jimmy Butler came down, shot a 3 in fast break with a couple seconds left to go, and bricked it, and that effectively gave the Celtics the victory. The Warriors Conference Final wasn't that difficult. They had to go up against the Mavericks, and although it was a spectacular run by Luka and the Mavericks, at that point, they were clearly overmatched and the Warriors beat them quite easily. The Mavericks were able to steal one game. They had a hot game from Dorian Finney-Smith, Reggie Bullock, and Luka went off as well. But in the end, the Warriors took the rest, and it was really an easier path for the Warriors to get to the final. And then, as we know, at that point, Boston matches up against the Warriors. They have a big win in game 1. The Warriors bounce back in game 2. The Boston Celtics win one more game, but Golden State eventually closes it out on the Celtics home floor. And just like that, the Warriors are champions. But it's a little bit different this time around. The Western Conference Finals saw two completely different teams in the Nuggets, who were beat by the Warriors in the first round last year, and the Lakers, who didn't even make the finals at the playoffs at all last season. But the Eastern Conference Finals was the exact same, but it was a completely different outcome. You see, the Heat went up 3-0, and Boston almost made a comeback, and they almost did the impossible and won 4 straight after being down 3-0, but on their home floor, they lost. They got embarrassed, and Miami took the victory and advanced to the final. Now, around this time last year, the Nuggets already lost. They had already been out of the playoffs for a while, so they didn't really make any major moves at that point. They were waiting for free agency, and they were waiting for Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. to get healthy, because they knew if they had those two guys healthy, they would be legit contender. So then you enter the season, and the expectations are high for Miami, and the same is for the Nuggets. You see, Miami, they had just came off an Eastern Conference Final berth, and although they had lost PJ Tucker, some people still had them in that 6th seed, 7th seed, 5th seed type of range. And the Nuggets, people expect them to be a top seed with their top 2 players. And as the season went on, these two teams went in 2 completely different directions. You see, the Nuggets, they ascended to the number 1 seed in the Western Conference, and towards the end of the season, they held that title firmly. You see, Miami, on the other hand, they couldn't shoot at all. They were like last in the league in 3-point percentage. They had one of the worst offenses in the NBA, and they were fighting for a playoff spot, a play-in spot consistently throughout the year. So now you enter the playoffs, and these are 2 completely different teams. Miami, they're the 8th seed, and they are fighting for that spot in the playoffs to play the number 1 seed of Buck. Now the Nuggets are chilling. They're waiting to see who they will have to play in the play-in from the play-in, and that ended up being the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, if we're talking about the path to get to the finals, let's start with Denver. Denver took out the Timberwolves in 5. Ant was able to steal a game. Then they took out the Suns in 6, a series in which they were surprisingly underdogs in. And then they beat the Lakers in 4, another series where some people were chatting up about how the Lakers could upset. Now, Miami had easily the harder path to the finals. In round 1, they had to face Giannis and the Bucks, but Giannis ends up getting injured. Miami takes advantage, and they end up winning in 5. In the second round, they played the Knicks. The Knicks was a tough and gritty team, and they dragged that series all the way out to 6 games. And then this past series, they had to play the number 2 seeded Celtics. And like I mentioned before, they went up 3-0, then they lost 3 games in a row, but in game 7, the legend of Caleb Martin came alive, and he led them to a victory over the Celtics. And that brings us to today, where we, in a couple of days, will see the Denver Nuggets match up against the Miami Heat, and I am here to break all of that down for you guys. Now, when it comes to the Nuggets, despite them being the number 1 overall seed and having arguably the best player in the league on their team, they have been underrated all season and all postseason. Like I mentioned, in round 1, although they were clearly the better team, people were talking about how the Timberwolves could win. In round 2, they were actually underdogs against the Suns, and in round 3, the talk was mostly around the Lakers and how they could upset. But Denver has stuck to their principles, and this has led them to the finals. They have the best offense in the league. They have a firecracker as their second option in Jamal Murray, who can explode at any time, and they have Nikola Jokic, who should have won his 3rd MVP this season, and who is also also in the midst of one of the most dominant postseason runs we have ever seen. Now, their offense is a lot of dribble handoffs, and it's not as simple as Jokic gets the ball and he just looks around like he's a quarterback or something. No, Jokic gets the ball, it's a lot of movement, he finds the open man, but it's not always Jokic. Sometimes Jamal Murray might get the ball, Michael Porter Jr. might get the ball, and they just kind of move around and kind of adjust to what the defense gives them. Now, of course, defensively, they're not the best team, but they're good enough, and with that amazing offense, you can see why they had a cakewalk in the West. Now, Miami, they're completely different. Now, you can't judge this Miami team based off the regular season. You have to look at what they've done in the playoffs so far. And so far, Miami has been lights out from the three-point line. That's a big reason why they beat Boston last round. In the games they didn't shoot really well, they lost, but in the games they shot well, like last night, they won. And it is easy to see how they could continue that in this series, but one fear I have for Miami is the fact that when they go cold and their offense gets stagnant, I know that their defense is good, but as we saw in the Lakers series, the Nuggets will take advantage of you, because just when your offense stops, don't mean their offense is going to stop. The Nuggets just have so many different ways to attack you and to score on the offensive end. It's kind of rare that their offense just goes in a drought, and as we saw in the Celtics series in Miami, it's not that hard for them. And this is something that really worries me, because I know on the defensive end, Miami likes to go to a zone, but the Nuggets are one of the best teams in the entire NBA when they go against zone defense. And man to man, I'm looking at Miami's personnel and I just don't know who over there could match up with the Nuggets and try to deter them a little bit. Yeah, you can put Bam on Jokic, but Jokic made light work of AD, so I'm assuming he's going to do the same to Bam. And Bam, really, I don't expect him to punish Jokic on the other end of the floor either. And I don't really expect Jimmy Butler to be guarding Jamal Murray. I know that's popular, I know that's what a lot of people want, but I think Spo's going to say we need to preserve his legs for offense, because they're going to need everything from Jimmy and some this series. So he probably starts off on Aaron Gordon. I can see somebody like Gabe Vincent maybe starting off on Jamal Murray, and that's kind of scary because I think Jamal gets off not easily on Gabe Vincent because he has been good on defense in this playoffs, but I think he gets his against Gabe Vincent. But it will be very interesting to see what Spoelstra do. He is the best coach in the league, so there's no doubt in my mind that he probably has an idea of what scheme he's going to use to slow down the Nuggets offensively, and the way he can change his offense to punish the Nuggets defensively. That way they tire out a little. That being said, I believe that Mike Malone will have a counter for Spoelstra's counter, as we saw against the Lakers when Darvin Ham switched Rui onto Jokic. Michael Malone knew exactly what to do, and it didn't really take long for him to combat that, and that is a big reason why the Nuggets beat them in 4 games. Now, if I was Coach Spo, I would find a way to punish Jokic a little bit. I know he's not bad defensively, but if I'm Spoelstra, I would find a way, because of how athletic Bam is, to at least take advantage of the vertical advantage he has over Jokic. So probably get him in some lobs, have him in some sets that allows him to take advantage of his athletic ability whenever he's matched up against Jokic. And at that point, it would be more about tiring Jokic out on the defensive end. That way he's not as good on the offensive end. Then trying to attack him and expose this weakness, which really isn't a weakness now that I've watched him throughout the playoffs, but I digress. Now, with all that being said, in the end, I have the Nuggets beating the Heat in 5 games. I think Miami probably takes one at home, but I don't think this is something like the Boston Celtics. I think the Boston Celtics should have mopped the floor with Miami, but I don't think they were there mentally, and I don't think they had the coach. I think Denver had the continuity, I think they have a great coach, and I think they have the better roster, and I think they're not going to waste time and play with their food. Therefore, Denver gets Miami out in 5. Miami takes one at home, but Denver ends up closing it out eventually. But that's just my prediction on this series. Let me know how you guys feel down in the comments, and let me know who you got and in how many games. But that's all I got for right now, and until next time, peace.